Welcome back to Analytical Strategy. Today we are going to be talking about one of the greatest players of all time, and that is Parvati Shallow. I want to talk about some key moments of her journey throughout the 4 seasons she was on the show. I think Parvati is an absolutely remarkable player, and through her incredible charm, wit, strategic prowess for the game, and of course getting a little bit lucky in some situations, it has resulted in her being one of the all-time greats and the player she is known for today. To the wider community, Survivor is probably known for being one of the greatest unluckiest players in Survivor. Whilst to me, Parvati is probably one of the greatest players that can make her own luck in Survivor. Many will say Parvati got lucky in a lot of situations, but when we break down these situations, they went in her favour as she is that good. She makes them benefit her position into the game. And yes, to me, she is definitely one of the all-time best players ever. Sure, I do think some luck has helped her obtain this title as one of the best players to ever play the game, but it has with all of the best players that have ever played the game. But I do like thinking of situations where if it didn't go the right way for Parvati in these specific circumstances, how this would have impacted her overall legacy. Yes, the butterfly effect. Let me break this down a little bit more. So Parvati firstly competed in Survivor Cook Islands, where she had a pretty decent showing overall, and she did make a deep run, but she wasn't an overly dominating player or anything like that. This season really was the Yule and Aussie show, and although it is remembered for having a phenomenal cast, it really is the later appearances of some of these contestants which made this cast so great, not necessarily from their original performance. So when we focus on the casting process for Micronesia, I feel Parvati was somewhat lucky to get one of the spots in this season. If she didn't get cast for this, Parvati may have not had the chance to play again, and she wouldn't have been able to show how good of a Survivor player she actually is, which I think is something that happens to a lot of the great contestants on the show that do not get a second chance. When looking at the list of the favourites for this season, we had some absolutely huge names from their original season. We had Johnny Fairplay, Yeoman, Aussie and Survivor. And Parvati likely got one of the last spots to compete on this tribe, based on the player's reputation after their first season. But damn, I'm glad she did, because we got to see her master the game within this season. But again, this didn't come without some hurdles overall. So in Survivor Micronesia, Parvati was targeted early in the game, and for me this only boosts how good she was this season overall. The players that get targeted early in these returnee seasons and make it deep I have a lot of respect for, and I give a lot of credit to them, as it would be extremely difficult to pull off. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail shortly. Coming up to the first Tribal Council, Johnny Fairplay was stuck in the middle of 2 alliances and really could have pulled the trigger on either Parvati or Eliza going first, and that was based on the edit that we saw. Fairplay quitting may have saved Parvati and her legacy if she really was in the firing line at this first tribal. I personally believe Eliza likely would have gone home first, and it's hard to know if production just made Parvati look like she was in more danger than she actually was, to make a better winner's story, but it really is impossible to know that with any certainty. So once Fairplay had left the game, Survivor then became the middleman between the 2 alliances, and she really had the say of Parvati's longevity in this game. If Survivor went to the other side of the numbers, Parvati again would have been in the firing line and could have been one of the next to go. But to Parvati's credit, she's the one that really convinced Survivor to stay with her side of the numbers, and solidified Survivor, Amanda, and herself as the power trio in this game. This is how Parvati can create her own luck. But again, if one of these early factors went slightly different, if Fairplay decided to play on, or if Survivor went with the other group of the numbers, who knows what legacy Parvati would have today. She may have not had the chance to play in any future seasons like Heroes vs Villains, but again, we have to give major credit to Parvati in pulling Survivor in to ensure her side of the numbers were safe, especially when to Survivor it looked as though she was joining 2 power couples in Parvati and James and Aussie and Amanda. So after Survivor made this decision to join Parvati and Amanda, Parvati and Survivor to me were the 2 key people that ran this game. Parvati made some absolutely amazing gameplay, from blindsiding Aussie to pulling in Natalie and Alexis over to create the Cross-Tribe Alliance and the Black Widow Brigade. They really played a great game, and both deserve the recognition of being great players from this alone. So the next twist that really changed Parvati's legacy and really assisted in her winning the game was the surprise twist of changing it up from a final 3 to a final 2 out of the blue. From what I've read, again, not being able to say this with 100% certainty, as we really do not know what would have happened, but Survivor likely would have obtained the majority of the jury's votes to win this season. This twist late in the game enabled Survivor not to be in the picture when it was time for the jury to cast their votes, and Parvati was able to get the win, and deservingly so. People who say she didn't deserve to win because of a late twist is unfair to how good she really was this season. It wasn't like she was voted out third and came back with 6 people in an idol or anything like that. She played the duration of the game and she played it extremely well. And yes, she did get lucky in the end, but that happens in many seasons due to the abundance of twists in the game. But from that final 2, she was easily the best player to me. But again, in the notion of the butterfly effect, if this twist did not occur and Parvati lost, I do think she still would have been a lock for heroes versus villains, but she wouldn't have had the chance to play in Winners at War. So Parvati was then clearly cast within the Heroes vs Villains season after this dominant performance within Micronesia, and again she was a target by everyone from the get-go. This time she was being pinpointed by almost everyone on the Villains tribe, and she really looked to be in massive danger in the early stages of the game. Again, to me, overcoming this is absolutely massive in my eyes, and is a key reason why she is one of the best players ever. I also want to compare this to Spencer in Cambodia and Sarah in Winners at War. Prior to both of these seasons, when contestants were asked in interviews who was the first to go, it was almost always Spencer, it was almost always Sarah, and in this circumstance Parvati looked to be that player. To me, this is what makes these 3 players games so incredibly impressive in these subsequent seasons. So in the early stages of Heroes vs Villains, Parvati was able to skate by, with the Villains being a really dominant tribe overall, and they lost the outsider in Randy at their first immunity loss. Her first real challenge was when both tribes went to tribal that night, and Boston Rob won individual immunity. His alliance planned to split the votes against Parvati and Russell. They expected Russell to play the idol on himself, and for Parvati to go home. They could not lose. Now a lot went right for Parvati at this moment, and you really need to give a lot of credit to Russell for this move, but there are a range of factors that we can break down. Firstly, the obvious is Russell giving her the idol to save her and put himself in danger. So to me, this is a combination of both luck and strategic skill, both on Russell and Parvati's part. The luck part comes down to Russell playing in back-to-back seasons. He mentioned later on that part of the reason he was so willing to give the idol to Parvati was that he was so exhausted, and that if this move didn't work he was willing to go. However, whilst this may be the case, you have to give Parvati a massive amount of credit for how close she was able to beat a Russell, and how much Russell required her in the game for his individual game to be successful. In these circumstances, the player with the idol will generally protect themselves if they are in danger of going home. So it was really fortunate of Parvati to not only be aligned with a player who had an idol, but also one who was willing to play it on their ally and put their life on the line. There isn't many players in the history of Survivor who would do that. So if Russell does decide to play the idol on himself, Parvati will go home regardless of Tyson switching his vote. If Russell plays the idol on himself, Parvati gets the majority of the vote if Tyson switches and she goes home. If Russell plays the idol on himself, Tyson doesn't switch his vote, it's a 3-3 tie between Parvati, Russell, Tyson, Russell safe, it goes to a revote, Parvati goes home. So it is really important in this circumstance that Russell did play the idol on Parvati, and she is extremely fortunate that he did. So another key thing that did go right for Parvati within this tribal was Tyson flipping his vote. This move not even Russell, who planted the seed, knew was going to happen. And if Russell didn't speak to Tyson and make this move possible and still played his idol on Parvati, he would have been the one to go home. Russell going home would have also derailed Parvati's game based on the numbers at this point in time. There were so many factors to this one tribal that needed to go right for Parvati to progress, to have a shot to get to the end, and they all aligned perfectly. So once Russell had made this move, this allowed Jerri to come over to their side and for them to obtain the majority of the numbers within the villains, and then the villains and the heroes were able to get to the merge 5 versus 5. So the next huge idol play of the game was one that Parvati constructed herself, and this is where she was able to create her own luck in the game. Firstly, she had her own idol, but once she was able to get a second one from Russell, who thought she was in danger at the time, she was able to make one of the best moves this game has ever seen. People think Parvati was a genius for playing the idol on Jerri and Sandra to save the villains, which she was, but when you really think of it and you break down this move mathematically, it didn't matter that much who she played them on. The villains were still going to have an overwhelming advantage to maintain majority. Jerri and Sandra were the safe bet, as Danielle had immunity, Amanda gave it away that it likely wasn't going to be Parvati, and Russell was pretending to be on the hero side, so it was extremely unlikely they would vote for him either. But with the notion of the butterfly effect in play, let's say she got them wrong and she played them for herself and Russell instead. The vote would have been a 5-5 tie. Parvati and Russell would have been safe from the immunity idols. Danielle would have been safe from the necklace. And Jerri and JT would have been safe from the 5 versus 5 split. It then would have come down to Sandra versus 4 of the heroes to draw that rock. And that is an 80% chance of this move still working even if she picked the wrong person. Now that is what I call creating your own luck. In the 20% chance it goes wrong, the heroes then take over, so it was definitely the right call to play it safe with Jerri and Sandra. But even if she was bluffed incorrectly, I still believe this season would have ended pretty similarly, but with a one-sided rock draw added in. So after Parvati made this move and the merge episode was over, she was really the glue that kept the villains together. She had to stick to Russell in the early stages of the game because she had no choice. But as the game evolved, so did she. And to me, Parvati was the core reason the villains were able to stick together until the end, with the exception of Danielle being blindsided. So by the time Parvati got to the final, she was honestly really unlucky not to win a second time. Even with losing, it probably marked her as the best player of all time after this season, all the way up until Tony won Winners at War, based on the general consensus of the public. That is an amazing track record. It used many strategic elements, charm, intellect, beauty, and of course a sprinkle of luck to make it all happen. But if one of these situations goes differently, we may not even be talking about Parvati in these conversations. But again, I think Parvati was the type of player that made these situations go in her favour, and played the card she was dealt to maximise her advantage, and therefore her chances of longevity in the game. So once Parvati appeared on Winners at War, she had far too high of a reputation to ever have a chance at a deep run in the game. Going into an all-winners season as arguably the best player in the history of the game, it was always going to be a difficult journey for Parvati. I do think she could have done a couple of things better, such as playing on Wendell's fire token offer a little bit more, but ultimately I think her luck also ran out this season being switched onto the minority within a small tribe. I think it was probably a mistake by production to switch from 2 tribes to 3 tribes in this season, as the odds were generally going to advantage the new school numbers. So again, if this twist wasn't included, or if she was switched onto an old school majority, who knows what could have happened. She may have even won again. But to me, I think it would have been a very, very difficult journey for Parvati to make it to the end, regardless of her position in the game. Her reputation was far too high for anyone to ever allow that to happen. So overall, I think she is absolutely deserving to be one of the best players of all time. And whilst luck did help her out in some circumstances, it does in everyone's game when you really break them down to the core. And you do need luck on your side to get to the end of any given season. And it is very, very interesting to think about if something went slightly different. How would that have affected the future of their game? So what did you guys think of this type of video? Who would you like me to break down next? Please let me know in the comments. Thanks to everyone for the huge support and getting me over the line for 1,000 subscribers. Let's keep this channel growing to allow more content to be produced, so if you are new, remember to smash that subscribe button. That's all for today. This is Analytical Strategy and we are signing out once again. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.